When it comes to building a website, you may or may not know this, but you need two things. One, you need a domain name. That's the .com, whatever .com, whatever .net, etc., etc. The other thing you need is hosting. And hosting is kind of the brains behind the operation. So it's what actually stores all the files. It's what delivers the results to a visitor. So if a visitor wants your product page, then the web hosting is in charge of actually delivering that product page to you. Now, when it comes to a domain name, it really isn't critical where you get a domain name from. If you wanted to get by with going to a place that offers a cheap domain name, most likely you'll be okay as long as it's not a really crazy website you're getting it from. If it's like GoDaddy or something like that, getting a domain name from there is not that big of a deal. And I should take a step back and say, where you get your domain name from and where you get your web hosting from doesn't necessarily need to be the same place. It's perfectly okay if you buy them at two different places. Now, you might get a little bit of a deal if you buy them together at the same place, and it's a little bit more convenient by paying for them all from one account at the same place. But it's very common, and it's not a big deal at all if you have your domain name and your web hosting from two different places. So domain name, really not that important where you get it from. As for web hosting, the same cannot be said for web hosting. Web hosting is absolutely critical for your business, and it's in your best interest to do your research on finding quality web hosting. I have learned firsthand what a big mistake it can be to just get dirt cheap web hosting. I've had some bad experiences, so hopefully you can learn from my mistakes and really do your due diligence, your research when picking a web host. Because what happened to me is I went to a place, and I won't name the name, but they claim that they were very reliable. You see commercials on TV. They claim 99.9% uptime. Well, don't always believe that hype, because I know for a fact my website was not up for 99.9% of the time. I had a situation where I was on shared hosting, which means my website was being shared with a bunch of other websites, which I don't know what the websites were. I just know something went wrong, which I'll describe right now. But what happened was my website was down for 3 straight days, nonstop. Now, if you do the math, 3 days nonstop in the span of a year alone is not that 99.9% uptime claim. It's definitely less than that. And that's not counting all the other random times which I noticed that my website was down. What had happened was, and again, I said I was on shared hosting, one website on my hosting was doing something really sketchy, and I have no idea what. But instead of just blocking that website, they blocked every website that was being shared on that host, which included my website. And it took them 3 days to figure out which one of the sites was actually doing something sketchy. And again, I was doing nothing wrong, but because that site was doing something sketchy, 3 full days my site was down. So when you're picking a web host, it's important to find someone that's reliable and that's fast. Fast is important, but so is reliability, because when you have a website that is down for 3 days, that does two things. One, it could potentially be loss of sales, right? If you're trying to launch a product on a certain day, if you don't have confidence in your web hosting, and if your site's going to be down on that day, that's a huge potential loss of revenue. So if you're someone who's selling products or launching products, something like that, you could potentially lose a lot of money by not spending a little bit extra on web hosting. The second thing is dealing with SEO. This is an SEO course, and Google really hates websites that are down, as you can probably imagine. The reason is when someone does a search and Google uses their algorithm to deliver the best results. If someone clicks to the first result that Google's delivering and it leads to a website that's down, well, the user is going to get frustrated. They're going to hit the back button and they're going to go to a different result. Well, the last thing in the world Google wants is for visitors to be frustrated using their search engine, because if this happens enough times, then someone will decide Google's constantly delivering me poor results, so I'm just going to use Bing or some other search engine. So Google and other search engines really hate websites that are down. And most likely, those 200 plus ranking factors, this is probably one of them, or a part of one of them, is that reliability of your website. When someone tries to go to your website, do you deliver your results or do you not? And a web host, the web hosting you use is absolutely critical to this. You need to really do your due diligence, read the reviews, and do your best to get reliable hosting. With that said, I've had horror stories, as you know, and I already did this due diligence, and I'm going to walk you through the web host that I use. Now, I'm not making a penny from this recommendation. I just know and understand that when you're learning SEO, when you're starting an online business, there are a million things you need to learn and a million decisions you need to make. So if you are just starting out, then I'm going to show you the web host I use and hopefully show you, maybe convince you that this web host is good, because from what I've had with the websites I've set up, the speeds have been absolutely incredible, and I've never thus far had a situation where my website was down. Compare that to a couple hosts that I've had in the past. Again, I've had sites be down, I've had clients' sites be down, and some web hosts, it could be a nightmare to get fixed. The web host that I had that was down for 3 days, at least their support was telling me what was going on. But I know I've had a web host where I called because my client site was down, and it was impossible to get to them, impossible to get to an answer from them, and it was just a complete nightmare. And finally, they did offer like a $100 package to where they could actually go in and fix it, even though it was their problem. So that's the end of my rants. I just want you to know that if you're getting dirt cheap web hosting and you're getting unreliable web hosting, it can be a real sense of frustration. So I really want you to do your due diligence. Again, I'm going to show you what I use, but don't take my word for it. Do your own research, make your own decision, because your web hosting is incredibly important, especially depending on what your website's actually doing. For example, with Amazon, if they're selling millions, billions of dollars of products every day, I would be spending a lot of money on hosting to make sure my website was as fast and reliable as possible. If you're just a blog that gets some traffic and collects emails, then it may not be as important to you, but you should spend whatever you think is appropriate on hosting, because it can really make a difference between success and failure. So with that said, I'm going to walk you through the web host that I like and enjoy, SiteGround. Okay, here is SiteGround, the web hosting that I've been hinting at that I recommend. And I have the shared hosting plan, which I know I just discussed a horror story about shared hosting. That was the reason why my site was down, was because I was on shared hosting and another website was doing something a little fishy and I was suffering for it. But I guess I didn't learn from my mistake, and I'm still doing shared hosting with them because obvious reasons. If I wanted dedicated hosting, it would be rather pricey, and I'm not really willing to make that commitment yet for my blog. But their shared hosting has a lot of cool features and benefits. One thing that I really liked was it was really easy to transfer. So if you don't have a website set up, their migration, they had some of the best customer service that I've ever seen, really. They basically did everything for me, getting my website transferred over, which can be a really tedious process and can have a lot of pitfalls, but they basically did everything for me. The other nice thing about them is some of the speed options, which I'm going to cover here in a second. Good support. They do automatic backups, which is something you usually had to pay a premium for. And let's just go ahead and get into once you log into the account. So this is what it looks like once you've signed up for the service and log in. So I will just show you my hosting area and cPanel. cPanel is where a lot of the hosting magic comes from. I wanted to just walk you through some of the cool speed tool services that they offer. And so the first thing is they offer a free CDN. So what is a CDN? It's a content delivery network. Basically, without a CDN, your hosting could be serving something from clear across the country. So if you live in California, their server might be in New York, and fetching back and forth from a longer location can slow things down. But with a content delivery network, it basically speeds this up by having multiple data centers. So wherever your location is, they find the closest server and fetch it that way. And this can have pretty significant speed performance boosts. And again, this is something you usually have to pay extra for. But with SiteGround, it's basically you just one click and it's automatically turned on, which is a really cool feature. The other, which I found even more beneficial, especially with WordPress websites, is a super cacher. So I won't get into the technical details, but basically caching is a way that is significantly faster to serve up a website, and it also requires less bandwidth intensive resources. So if you're getting lots and lots of traffic, some web hosts will start to slow you down or shut you down, but with caching, it definitely requires less resources, so you're able to get a lot more traffic coming to your website before you have to worry about anything. But to set this up, and again, it's basically just a click of a button. So if you have one website, you're basically just going to turn this on. You're going to go to level 2, turn it on, and you're going to go to level 3 and turn it on. So I have done it right here. And then the final step, and again, if you have WordPress, it's really simple. You just install their plugin and you'll have just a couple more buttons to click. So you just click these on, these two, and these three on. And that's basically it. I have seen just incredibly, a very noticeable difference right out of the gate once I clicked all these buttons on with my blog. It's been just considerably faster. Pages just load very quickly, and it's been extremely reliable. So I really just have no complaints with this service. Everything's just loaded really fast, and been very pleased thus far with SiteGround and their service. And again, you get all of these features basically free. Having a cache plugin like this, having the CDN, I've paid well into 3 figures per year just by having these little add-ons, but it's all included in their hosting service. So SiteGround is something that I really recommend, especially if you have a WordPress website. They seem to get WordPress better than others. But again, do your own research, find what works for you. There are several other good hosting platforms out there, especially if you have WordPress and you want a place that's really specializing in WordPress. SiteGround is extremely affordable, as you can see, just $4 a month to start, or I tend to recommend at least going to the $8 because of a few extra benefits and features. But some of the more premium ones might be $30 a month, and again, you have to make that decision yourself, and that decision, what I would recommend, is really based on what your website's trying to do. If it's just a blog, it's not getting a lot of traffic right out of the gate, then you might be able to do something like SiteGround. But if you're planning on getting millions and millions of visitors, or you're selling products and services, then you might want to think about other solutions. You have to do your research. But again, it's important to do your research, because if you just go to finding the cheapest deal out there, you could really pay in the long run. And it's usually a little bit of a hassle to switch servers once you do it later, unless you do SiteGround, where it's just a couple clicks and they basically do it for you. So I hope this has been helpful about hosting. I hope I haven't tried to be like a cheesy salesman with SiteGround. It's just, again, I know there's a lot of decisions out there you need to make. And if you haven't made this decision yet, then I highly recommend SiteGround, because they've been really good for me and a lot less of a headache than some of the other services that I've used in the past. Again, I'm not making a penny off of recommending SiteGround. I'm just trying to help you out and give you my recommendations. So hosting, incredibly important that you get right, and I hope this has been beneficial. Please ask me any questions in the discussions. If you have any questions about this kind of stuff, I'm more than happy to help.